This is episode 100 of Think Big with Michael Zellner. All positive, no politics. Joining me today for part two of his podcast interview is real estate guru John Elkington. In part one, John told us about how he got started in real estate, how he helped to revitalize Beale Street back in the early 1980s, his friendships with the Orpheum's Pat Halloran, entrepreneur Avron Fogelman, Tommy Peters, Preston Lamb, Rufus Thomas, B.B. King, some of the greats in Memphis history. And I had a lot more questions for him, so I brought him back for part two. John, thanks for coming back on today.
Thank you, Michael, very much.
My pleasure. You know, John, I grew up literally right around the corner from former Memphis mayor and Shelby County Mayor Bill Morris in East Memphis, like literally half a mile from me. You said of him recently, quote, "Celebrating Mayor Morris's 90th birthday, my great friend and truly the greatest mayor this community has had, special person," unquote. What is it about Bill Morris that makes him so special?
Well, I think Bill Morris had a vision of what he wanted Shelby County to be. He wanted to have significant economic development. And when he came into office, not much was happening in Memphis. Companies were moving out, things were being shut down. And he went out and actively recruited businesses and got international paper here, got Nissan to come in here, did a number of businesses and created an environment that made it very friendly for people to locate, made it helpful to FedEx and to other companies. And I think that was his great talent. He's a great salesman. And I think you need to have, beside administrative skills, which he had, I think you have to have the ability to convince people that your community is worth coming to as far as not only people, but businesses. And that is the difference, I think, between Memphis and Nashville. They have a much more active government. We really never had that. We've had spurts where people like Willie Harrington did things and Dick Hackett did certain things. But Bill Morris was certainly the best mayor we've ever had.
Real friendly man too. I used to run the jogging path. I went right past his house, and was probably at least a couple of times a week that I went by his house. That he was coming home in the afternoon, I always would wave and smile and just sort of say hello. And I never even knew him. Never met him personally. Didn't stop at his house because I felt like that would be a little bit intrusive. But just was always so friendly and always said hello when I passed by the house.
And he picked good people. Tom Jones worked for him, who's an outstanding person, and Bobby Lanier, and he picked the really good divisions heads, Larry Hilburn, and a number of people. It's too long to mention, but I think that's the quality of a leader, is the ability to set an agenda, which he did, to follow it up, and to be personally involved and not an absentee mayor. And then he did all those things. He really created the position of county mayor. It had just been formed. Having county government in the form it was, having a county mayor. And he's the one who really formed it and made it successful.
I know how important family is to you. How have you been able to balance work life and personal life for so many years?
Well, I have really terrific kids, and I have a great wife, and my kids are really motivated to do things, and all of them are, in their own ways, are very successful. My oldest son, Fletcher, is one of the greatest commercial real estate people I've ever dealt with. He's very, very smart. And Griffin Elkington, my middle son, is a terrific home builder, started on his own. And he, with a number of other people, have become very successful. And then Beau, my 21-year-old, wants to be an entertainer. And I said to him, that's the hardest business you can ever pick. I mean, right. And so he goes to school in Nashville. He's a songwriter. For a guy who was a great athlete in high school at 5'9" and 160 pounds, he played with heart, and that's what you got to do sometimes. And he has a great heart and is a very hardworking guy. And over Christmas, he played for the family some of his new songs he's written, and they're really, as a proud father, I know that's one thing, but they're really well done. and well thought out and very good stories. And he just sticks with it. He works hard. He was in Nashville over the weekend, came home, and I'm very encouraged. They have a good work ethic, and they're all unique in their own way.
And I'm sure that, that's a reflection of you and Valerie, the way you raise your kids, the way you're around them all the time, spending that quality time with them, not always just working, is so important.
Well, I think I spent more time with Beau because I was older in life than I spent with other kids. But I think, yeah, all of them are unique in their own way, and all of them are very respectful of their neighbors and people they're friends with and people they do business with. And so it always makes me feel good when people say, "Are you Griffin Elkington's father? Are you Beau Elkington's father? Are you related to Fletcher Elkington and Griffin Elkington?" And that makes you feel great.
Absolutely. You not only had major projects and developments in Memphis, but you've branched out across the region too. You founded Performer Entertainment Real Estate, have done work, I believe, in Nashville, St. Louis, New Orleans, on the Tennessee River, the shoals of northwestern Alabama. Talking about how to do what you're doing, you recently said, quote, "You just don't put up a sign. You need to develop lasting relationships and match the restaurant to the site. We have 5 leases on bill that are more than 25 years old. Who would ever believe Desi Vega would go to Sheffield raising the bar," unquote. Tell us a little bit about some of the great things you've done and are doing outside of Memphis.
Well, we're concentrating on 2 projects. One is in Sheffield, Alabama, right on the Tennessee River, 2.5 miles on the river, and on what they call Spring Creek. And it was basically a dump. It was an environmental area, and the city took its most valuable piece of property, which is the riverfront, and really never developed it. So a very tough project. And took us a year to get environmental approvals. We had to have a brownfields grant. We had to box up all the contamination. And it was also a shooting range. Had to get all the brass shells, casings out. And it took a while. It took a year, and to get all the approvals by the Alabama Department of Environmental Management and the U.S. Department of EDA and the Environmental Protection Agency. So we did all those things. And then, because it was a historic site, it's where the Trail of Tears concluded in Alabama, and they moved people. They moved the Cherokees from there to Waterloo, Tennessee, and then up the Tennessee River, all the way to the Arkansas, and then to Missouri, and so forth. So and it is a very sacred piece of ground as for the Cherokees. So I had to get the Cherokee Indians to approve the site, which took a while because there was no reason for them to do that. But they did, and then we had to get various levels of government to do, and took 4 years to get all those approvals. And a lot of time people give up, and then of course now we're in a high interest period. Yeah. But we have secured good tenants. They're not just local tenants, and we're very careful to make sure that those tenants were not going to compete with existing people in the marketplace. The Shoals has 151,000 people live there, and it really was not fully developed, or it didn't really get all of its opportunities until really the last 5 or 6 years, because it didn't have a great highway system to it. 72 wasn't a finished road till recently. I-55, which goes to Huntsville and over to Sheffield and Tuscumbia, was not really done. So it took a while to make this project and make this area attractive. It's a great place to retire. They have a great university in the University of North Alabama, which has grown phenomenally over the last couple of years. Good political leadership, but they in a great place. The average means or houses is way low. compared to other areas. We're 2 hours from Nashville, 2 hours from Memphis, 2 hours from Birmingham, and you're on the Tennessee River, which is a major part of it, across from what they call 7 Mile Island, which is a really terrific island that has lots of wildlife, and it can never be developed. And so then you have to go through all the approvals, Michael, from the TVA and the Corps of Engineers and the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. There's just a tremendous bureaucracy, and that's why no one wanted to do the project. And we decided we wanted to because a lot of Memphians go to Pickwick, and a lot of people in Birmingham go there, and a lot of people from Nashville go to Lake Wilson, and it's a great site. It was the first place where they had development of steel in Alabama, and I think we talked about this last time, but the Lady Ensley furnace, which was located on the property, is the same Ensley family that developed the area, the Ensley district in Birmingham. They developed things before they went to Birmingham. It's also the original founder on that property, or owner of the property, was a guy named Loeb, and he was unsuccessful there, moved to St. Louis, and developed the Lehman Brothers, or Loeb, which merged with Lehman Brothers and became a very successful. Loeb Lehman was a major financial group but he started in Sheffield. There's been 3 U.S. senators born there. Fred Thompson, the majority leader, and the other one escapes me. Hugh Heflin was born there, and so it's a great, it's tremendous history, and I think I told you last time. The first time I went there, I found an Indian arrowhead that had been part of the Cherokee Indians were there. And we had to go through the other thing. We had to get a very extensive archaeological review, which we did. In the history, it's 700 pages. And the other major thing we had to do was an environmental. Turned out that we had what they call the hooded bat, which are a very small bird, or bat, actually, that were located in some of the trees on the property. And they're on the endangered species list. So we had to have those removed without damaging them. So it's all these things you go into, and that's why the development business is so interesting. And now as we really get into really in-depth development and finish up the roads and the marina and all that, it's amazing. It took us 4 years to get a road that has just been approved to the site and to the area. And so it is, that's what the development is all about. It's about patience. It's about perseverance. It's about character. And, as my friend Alan Blomquist always says, 50 friends have 50 friends. And you need all those friends to make it happen. And, Alan was the executive producer of the Walk the Line, which was filmed in Memphis, one of my dearest friends. And he actually watched the first part of the podcast. But he is the one who really taught me about, you have to in life keep your friends, and you have to in life, it works both ways. You have to help them when they need help, and they can help you when you need help. And he is definitely one of my friends, is Fogelman and the other people we talked about last week. And I think that's very important in business. You can't do it by yourselves. You need relationships. How we got our government grants on this project was my friend Zach Wamp, who was a congressman, ran for governor in Tennessee, was friends with the chief of staff of the governor of Alabama, and he introduced me to what they call the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, and then to ADECA, the Alabama Department of Economic and Community Development. All those were very important pieces to get this done. No one could just show up there and try to do it by themselves. It wouldn't work. And you needed 50 friends to make it happen.
Talking about the strong relationships, you talked about the long-term leases on Bill. You just mentioned all the people and the relationships you developed, on real estate. Is, building the strong and genuine relationships you refer to, are those, some of the biggest things that successful and business people do, maybe over people that are not as successful?
Well, I think that personal relationships and being honest and straightforward and truthful is very important. Sometimes things don't work out. That happens in life. Yeah. And I think you need to have the ability to treat people fairly and honestly. And sometimes, as I say, things just don't work out. And but when people invest money with you, when people make a commitment to help you, you need to honor that commitment, and you need to figure it out. Not everything we've done in our lives has been perfect. It's certainly not. I mean, we've been through 4 recessions, and I think we talked last time about Atlantic School. Interest rates were 18.5%. Yeah. I mean, the chances of it surviving are just unbelievable. And the union planners, now regions, was very helpful. And we made a commitment to Dick Trapier and to Byron Birch, our loan officer. Hey, we're going to get this project finished. Don't worry about it. And we did. And we have a lot of those examples. Union train station in Nashville, same thing. It was a very difficult project. We got funding from the federal government through what they call the UDAG, the Urban Development Action Grants, which were very popular in the early 80s. And this is an interesting story. They have twice a year, they would pick projects in the country. And so guy calls me up from the UDAG office and says, well, we need a $1 million letter of credit by 5:00 today to approve your project. So I'm in Memphis, he's in Washington. So we banked with Citibank. I called my banker and he said, I don't know if I can get that done. I said, well, if we're going to do this project, you got to get it done. And so he said, so he got the issue, we got the letter of credit issued. And he said, I don't, they didn't have Zap mail. They had Zap mail, but they didn't have the internet like it is today and emails. So he said, I'm going to send one of my younger guys on the shuttle between New York and Washington. And can you give me the address where he has to go? So remember, he had to have it by 5:00. Yeah. So he left at 3, caught the shuttle at 3, got to Washington, the traffic, hour on a Friday, and got there with about 3 or 4 minutes to go and gave them the letter of credit, which was a major accomplishment. And that was really, that building was the real cornerstone for the Gulch project in Nashville, which is just spectacular. And, we're still friends with all the people we worked with on that. And that was a major accomplishment. And it was this guy that I don't even know his name, who basically got on the shuttle in New York and flew to Washington, got a cab, went to the Department of Commerce and got it done, or went to HUD, I guess it was HUD in those days, who administered the program.
I bet he probably still tells that story today too.
Well, it's like one of my greatest stories, I think, is when I worked for Apperson Crump. I did all of Mr. Crump's stuff, and he was an incredible individual. He's one of the most honest, truthful, God-fearing. I mean, he was just an incredible person. And so he calls me one morning and he says, well, what are you doing today? And I said, really nothing, whatever you want me to do, Mr. Crump. And he said, well, you got to go to Chicago. And I said, Chicago? He said, yeah, Guarantee Trust, the charter we have, is going to be a new bank, and it's an old charter, and you've got to get a bank routing number, and the place you get it is with Rand McNally in Chicago. That's the only place you can get it. And I said, well, who should I ask for? He says, I don't know, just go to Rand McNally and get this routing number and bank routing number. So he said, "How much money do you have?" And I said, "Well, I think I was, just out of law school. I said, I had, I think, $10 or $12. Well, I'll reimburse you, but that should be enough to get your cab and come by the office and I'll get you another $10. So this is true. So I go by the office, go to the airport, get on the plane, go to Rand McNally and said, I need to get a bank routing number. So they direct me to the man who does that. And he says, "Look, this takes a month or two. I can't do it today." I said, "Look, Mr. Crump sent me up to Chicago. I got to have it today. They're opening the bank tomorrow. They need a bank routing number." And so the charter, it was an old charter that they were revising and creating this new bank. And the Secretary of State in those days was a guy named Ike Clanton. And so he said, "Well, let me call the Secretary of State and make sure there's a valid deal." And they said, they call, and the man calls and says, is Secretary Clanton?" He said, "Well, no, he died about 10 years ago." And so he said, "Well, is this a valid charter?" And so he went through that for about an hour and got that straight. And then I got the bank routing number and flew back. And for 20 years after that, Mr. Crump would tell that story. I could have quit. I could have said no. But my big line was, I said, "Mr. Crump told me to get this done today, and I got to get it done." And he was such a special man. And his son was our first architect we used a lot, Mitt Crump, who's a terrific architect. But life is full of those kind of stories, and you have to make a commitment in life not to quit until you've exhausted all your remedies and all the possibilities. And I think that's in one of my traits, and I think the thing that's very important. And when you get involved in the second thing, when you get involved in development, you got to give it your all. We're doing this restaurant with Penny Hardaway now, we're not the owners, we're just the helping, and we're the brokers. And it's had a lot of things you had to get accomplished. You had to get a occupancy certificate of occupancy, and a building that was a hotel, and we had no direct grease trap and things like that. And it took working with a number of people in the city, and I don't think very many people could have gotten that done in the time frame that we were working under. So, and it's all because people know you, and you've been very honest with them, and you've helped them before. And if they ever have a problem, you make sure. I think one of the things is very, very important is to give back to the community. I've been on probably 20 boards, but I'm very active. The Salvation, I'm on now, the chairman of the Salvation Army, and they need have a tremendous mission to help the city, but they need help, and so that's what we're doing now, and hopefully this year we'll get their newer, younger board of directors. We'll get a better program of their kettle program. We'll get some of the work that hasn't been done and some of the buildings they need to renovate done. And so I think all those are important. And, I've been on the contractors board. I've been on the land use control board during the period when we really had growth in Memphis. And you got to give back to get things back. And I call it being a civic entrepreneur. Avram Fogelman, and I said this to you, Michael, the other day, is the greatest one we've ever had. There's no one who can top him. He did more for Memphis, and he didn't have to get the limelight. He would do it behind the scenes. He would do it whenever the mission called for it. And he, like Bill Morris, a terrific salesman, sells his city all the time, and he's just an incredible guy, and understands how to get through perseverance. I mean, he had, obviously, all of us in the real estate business had a very tough time in the 1990s when they changed the tax laws, and we went through a recession. He came through and did it the right way, made sure everything was taken care of, and that people appreciate that. And that's why his name is so revered in the real estate business in this country.
Speaking of Penny Hardaway, a little bit over, 3 years ago, he gives you a call. wants to talk to you about opening up a restaurant. And I understand that initially you tried to talk him out of it. Tell us a little bit about that conversation and how Penny.
Yeah, but Penny Hart. I've known Penny since he played basketball at the University of Memphis, and I remember when they all these different people were trying to recruit him to be his agent, and the Draper family, who are incredible, make an incredible contribution to Memphis. Leonard Draper is my lifelong friend, and it was Penny's initially introduced me to him. And we've stayed friends for a long time. And he calls me one day and says, "Look, I'm thinking about opening a restaurant. What do you think?" I said, "I don't think I would do it if I were you. There's no upside for you." And I said, the greatest athlete of all time, Michael Jordan, couldn't make a restaurant work. And there are very few people. John Elway has been successful in his restaurant, but it's different than coaching basketball. But he was insistent. So I said, "Look, call me back in a couple of months, and if you still feel that way, let's go do it." And he did. Call me back the exact time. 2 months later, called me back and said, "I want to do this." So just like recruiting basketball, you got to recruit a team of people to do a successful restaurant. And we had lots of opportunities, but he wanted to make a statement for the community because he loves this community and he's revered in the community. So we went through lots of potential operators, and we came across a company called Gourmet Services, which is owned by a woman, Virginia Golston, who's an African-American, been in business since 1974, which is an incredible, it's a generational company. So to get Penny Hardaway and to get an African-American woman-owned company, which we've been dying for in this community for years and years and years, was very inviting to me. And so Bilal Akil, who's Penny's manager, and Gordon Cunningham, Roger Cunningham, who's his business manager, accountant, we all got together and said, "Hey, we're going to do this." And we had to pick a location. And so we wanted to go in the Westin Hotel. And it's very complicated when you work with Marriott or Hilton or any chain about a restaurant. So it took us a couple of years to get that worked out. And just the ramifications you have to go through. And I think he's really done a good job of bringing the right people together. I think over the next 10, 12 years, it'll be a very successful restaurant. But it's not just a sport. It's not a sports bar. It's much like Tiger Woods' restaurant in Jupiter, Florida. It has great food, and it's not just chicken wings, and it's not like Buffalo Wild Wings. It has really great food, and he has his own room there. Actually, I just worked out where he has now a parking space reserved, and it's just been an honor because he is Memphis, and he represents the best of Memphis. And I will tell you, Michael, when we were doing all this work and I had to raise this money and do all the things, get it done, and get all the right people, they were having a tough rough. It was a rough season, and so every loss hurt me as much as it hurt him. I promise you. Now it's so encouraging to see him being successful and his team being successful. And as I said last time, a city can't be great unless it has a great university, and he's helping make the University of Memphis a great urban university, which is very exciting.
What's your favorite entree there?
Actually, I like everything, but their breakfasts are really superb, and they have a omelet that's just out of the world. I mean, and there is, as you know, in downtown Memphis, there aren't a lot of business places where you can have breakfast, and that's what this is becoming in the morning. And what's also encouraging is the Grizzlies, the John Doyle, the Rock and Soul Museum, FedEx, my Memphis Light, Gas and Water, the Orpheum Theater, Brett Patterson, First Tennessee Bank, all have said we want to work with him and make this work. And I actually have a meeting tomorrow with the Rock and Soul Museum about how they can participate more and how he can contribute back to them, which is important. The rising tide, it's kind of a hackneyed expression now, but the rising tide lifts the boats. And I think of all the personalities in this community, if you handed out a list and say, name the 3 people or 5 people or 10 people that are most impactful in this community, Penny Hardaway would be one. He's an incredible guy. He really is.
He's the only one that I believe, and I say this, fully knowing that he's the only one that could have gotten Memphis and can get Memphis back to the prominence it had during the Dana Kirk days, during the John Calipari days. There's no one else that could have done it besides him.
Well, we've been really blessed. Gene Bartow was an incredible coach, and Penny and was a great civic participant. Calipari was, and Dana Kirk in his own way was very significant at the Colonial Country Club. But it's just, we've been very blessed. And I think the biggest treat I had in Penny, he introduced me to Larry Brown. Fogelman years ago, Michael, tried to get Larry Brown to coach at Memphis and worked very hard for him. And he ended up going to the University of Kansas. But, when I met him, I reminded him of the stories of, Fogelman and trying to get an NFL team and all the things that have happened in sports over the years. But Penny Hardaway certainly is the biggest name we've ever had in sports in this community. I hope, every night I kind of live and die whether he wins or loses his team, because he's just a terrific guy. I think he was treated shabbily by the NCAA because he's good at heart. He gives back to the university. He helps families that are in need. He taught high school basketball when his best friend got cancer. I mean, just incredible stuff. And not many people are that way. And he doesn't ask for much. He's a very soft-spoken guy, I think. But he'll be successful because he knows the right things to do. And he eats there every day. I mean, people tell me all the time they see him. And he's very gracious. He goes to the table, signs autographs, does whatever is necessary to promote it.
Not many people do that and that high up and have that kind of money.
Yeah, exactly right. And not many people give back to a community like he does. I think the greatest story about this restaurant, besides I think it's going to be very successful as far as food and so forth, is that here's an African-American woman who started a business in 1974 and has been in business since then, is very successful, has a tremendous balance sheet. And it's a generational company. We've been crying for years in Memphis to get more active African-American women in business. Carolyn Hardy has been terrific and done a great job out of the old Schlitz Brewery. But we need more of that. We need more people in the economic engine of this community. And I think this is great. And the people that she's hired, I think, add great value to what we're trying to do in Memphis. And, I have a good friend of mine who always says that is the single biggest problem is the economic chain in Memphis and people to participate. And there's been lots of attempts of getting things done, but this is really an example where they put significant money in, and I pray that it'll be very successful, and I know it will because everyone's working hard to make it successful.
You said, quote, "Don't confuse effort with the results," unquote. Have you found, sometimes in the business world, as long as you've been doing this, that there are people out there that think, just because they might work really long hours, that they should be rewarded, maybe get that attaboy, whether or not they hit a goal or not sometimes?
Well, that quote is not really mine. It's really Alfred Fogelman's. I copied it. And I think it doesn't matter how hard you work or how many hours you put in or what do you do. It's your results. That's what people judge it. and actually in my office, he gave me years ago a paperweight that basically says, "Don't confuse effort with results," and that's the truth. And it's just like if you can spend all the time in the world doing something, but if you don't reach the ultimate goal and make it happen, it's really not. It's really for naught. I mean, you may get experience, and I've had a lot. I've had a lot of experience on things, but I think that's a very a very pointed statement, and it's kind of flipping a little bit in that don't confuse effort with results, very glib, but it really is very important. It's a significant deal. He also said he gave me another paperweight. It says it's better to do one significant thing than 1,000 useless things, and that's true too. And anyway, it is. We're blessed to have the Fogelmans and the Hardaways and Bill Morrises and the people we've talked about in this community, and then we're blessed to have the people who come in here and share our community and tell people all over the world and what it's about. And we've had lots of those people come in here. I just think we're so blessed to have some great entrepreneurs that come in here. Kemmons Wilson, John Tigert, people like that. Fred Smith. I mean, he's the ultimate entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And they created Pit High at AutoZone. I mean, there's just hundreds, literally, that have started different businesses that have become very successful. My pacemaker came from Memphis that I got when I had my heart procedure, and it was Medtronics. Medtronics started in Memphis, and it's all over the world. It's actually now based in Ireland. But it is, it came from Memphis. It was started by a Memphis entrepreneur.
Wow. Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit last time. There's so many more positive things that have come out of Memphis than the negative stuff that goes on here.
Well, I think there's, I think, and I don't have the same nostalgia about the commercial appeal that a lot of their former writers have. I mean, there are great people, Otis Sanford and a number of people who've come out of there that are really making a continuing contribution. But they were also very negative about a lot of things, and they didn't really help this community. They almost drove St. Jude's out of the community by their reporting. Everyone has problems, and they seem to accentuate the problems, and did. And they're really not an impact anymore. I read the Daily Memphian every day, and they really are a much more positive Memphis paper, and that's what a paper should do. Yeah, should you talk about the problems in the community? Yeah, but you shouldn't dwell on them. You should give solutions of what you think should happen. And I think I told you last time we talked, Michael, about this. WREG Channel 3 did a 1972 program about downtown Memphis. And I watch it now. I've watched it 2 or 3 times. You can look at YouTube and pick it up there. And every Memphian who's in the development business or in the leasing business or is interested in the growth of the city should look at it. And look where that was in 72 and where we are today. And I think I've told you this before, but it takes leadership, and a lot of people are silent leaders. And I read in the Nashville Tennessean over the weekend, they picked the development leaders in Memphis and in Nashville who created their great downtown complex. 12 years ago, they said, we're going to do these buildings. We're going to do this. We're going to build a new Country Music Hall of Fame. We're going to put the symphony downtown. We're going to build hotels. We're going to do the arena. We're going to clean up Broadway. We're going to build new hotels. All that was done by a group of developers who had the faith in the community and had leadership who did that. And they were all people from Nashville. Just like Avron Fogelman's from Memphis, Carol Coletta's from Memphis. You see the people who are doing stuff are from Memphis. And, it's great to have out of town people come into a community, but they don't have the same feelings or
Right.
understanding of what it's all about. And, they had this group that came into town and they're going to redo the Pinch District. And they've been talking about redoing that for 5 or 6 years. And the guy has no idea. He brings a leasing agent in from Los Angeles as opposed to hiring some people here who understand what the market needs and who the people they should get involved. And, I think that's very important that we have that. Yes, you can have companies like Highwoods, but they had a local guy that ran, Steve. Steve did a great job of running Highwoods and building an incredible corridor. Boyle has been incredibly important to this community. And so I think when you get local people involved, I've heard Kevin Kane say this, and I feel the same way. He grew up here, he lived here, he worked here, and he wants to be buried here. Now, I think I told you I want to be buried at Vanderbilt University. I want my ashes spread there, but that says a lot to me. That's a very high statement that you care that much about the community. And it's just, we're so blessed, to be here. And yes, there are robberies. Yes, there are carjackings. Yes, there are shootings. But, there are so many other good things. I think the greatest thing that's going to happen to downtown Memphis is going to happen this May when they open that riverfront park. It will be the #1 riverfront park in the United States. And I've been developed in New Orleans and in Cincinnati and St. Louis, and all those cities have really abandoned their riverfront, and they've come back to try to do development. But nothing like this. Nothing will top it. So I look at Memphis in May, people complaining that they're not going to have the barbecue contest like it was. But we're going to have something better than that. And we are going to have the barbecue contest. And they will end up having the music, Beale Street Music Festival. But, it'll be different. It'll be, it won't be a mud field that is there for a whole year after 1 month. And I think people should understand that. How can we work together to make things happen? And my friend Ron Bells, is really maybe the smartest developer I know, said to me the other day, when they did the Peabody, and when we did Beale Street and so forth in the Orpheum, we didn't ask for huge subsidies. We asked for tax abatements on real estate taxes. But we put real equity in the projects. Today now, everyone wants the government to take care of everything.
Yeah.
Take care of tax abatements. But with this guy from California who wants to do this project in the Pinch District is ridiculous. Nobody should get a 30-year pilot or a 20-year pilot. And with all due respect, I'm friends with the Carlyles. They shouldn't have gotten the city to guarantee of their bond issue. That's unreal. And we have the issues in this city that are much more important to solve than building another hotel. If it works economically, there ought to be a way to do it beside the city guaranteeing something. And I think that's the way I feel about it. And do I encourage development? Do I have a lot of respect for them? Yes, I do. And their father was a friend of mine. But I don't think at this time in the history of the city, when we can look at 38103 and downtown zip codes that are the fringes, where we have an opportunity to improve those neighborhoods, that we should be spending money guaranteeing a loan, which affects your bottom line for a city. And I don't think they should do that.
You're also an author. You wrote the book back in 2008 called Beale Street, Resurrecting the Home of the Blues. Tell us a little bit about the book and why you decided to write it.
Well, I felt that you needed to tell the story, and it's interesting. It's now in its third printing. And I was looking on eBay the other day, and some guy was selling a used copy for $80. I wish I could have sold for $80.
Yeah.
And but it talks about what we did and the people involved and the credit to the various lenders and people who took chances on going there. And it's a blueprint really of doing development. And actually, the publisher asked me to write a new kind of continuation, because it ends really it ends in 2014, I think. And he said, you ought to add what happened, additional stuff. And then I did a children's book, which is called The Pirates of the Gayoso Bayou, which is now in its fifth printing. And it's a fictitious story about Lafayette and Andrew Jackson coming to Memphis to bury the treasure from the Battle of New Orleans in the Gayoso Bayou, which runs under Beale Street, runs under all of downtown. And my grandchildren and my sister's grandchildren, that's their book. They always say, when are you going to write another one? So I'm in the process right now of writing a second children's book
Awesome.
about Memphis and about the river and the different things that have happened. And it's just another thing. We used that reader, by the way, and the Rotary Reader Club. I donated the books, a lot of them, on the Pirates of the Gayoso Bayou, and to help people learn how to read. And other people in Memphis done it. Brad Martin had a great book he wrote. Other people have done that, and then I'm not going to become another famous writer, but it tells the perspective. And I think local books are really interesting. I think they're the most. I think Bill Morse's was a terrific book. Otis Sanford's was great, and I forgot the name of the author. He's a teacher at CBS HS who wrote a story about the Memphis basketball during the 70s and 80s and 90s, and it was a fabulous book. And so I think those local books, kind of tell you where you are. I think you realize I donated 36,000 pictures and different stuff to the University of Memphis, because someday somebody will want to know, how did this all happen?
Yeah.
And it was so interesting. I talked to one of the reporters at Channel 13 the other day about the crowd on Beale Street. And I said, well, I remember in 1983, it wasn't quite as big as it is today.
Yeah.
It's been on New Year's Eve. So, I think that this city has such a great history that we ought to continue to promote that history. And I don't know if you ever knew Charles Crawford at the University of Memphis, but he did a great job of promoting the history of what happened. And there was a guy named Bob Sigafus who wrote a great book from Beale Street to Cotton Row that told the history of the entrepreneurs who really made this city happen. I mean, I used to sit in church next to Kemmons Wilson, who was the greatest entrepreneur of all time. And when things were tough in the real estate market, he always would give me a fake with his picture on it. They started off at 10,000 and ended up in $1 million bills. They looked like a real bill. And he said, and he was so encouraging about things. But where would Memphis have been without Kemmons Wilson, Fred Smith, Pitt Hyde, and then the people who worked on the nonprofit businesses, the Pat Howards, the Carol Colettas, the Kevin Kanes, all those people made a contribution. And I look back at DeArmey Bailey and how many meetings we had to get that Civil Rights Museum off the ground. We met for 5 years.
Wow.
And finally got to the legislature during that election year. And Ned McWhirter, who was the speaker and later governor, we went to him and said, we need $3 million to get this off the ground. He said, I'll give you $1.5 million if you can get both mayors of Memphis to sign on to this deal. And of course, Dick Hackett was a very conservative guy, and we were not sure he would do that, but he put his own personal beliefs behind getting this museum done, which is a great contribution. Same thing with the Orpheum Theater, and the same thing with the Agri Center. It was Ned Cook who basically led that. Now, it hasn't worked out quite like we had hoped it would work, but it got built. And it's a great facility, but it's just never been fully utilized in the vision that Ned had. But, those kind of public-private partnerships are important, along with the developments, the Billy Orgles, the Henry Turleys, all those people who have made significant contribution to building buildings of stature in this community. And I think it's great that they are involved in all of that.
You've been involved in so many different organizations in your lifetime. You were president of the Memphis Rotary. I believe you used your dad's gavel from the 60s to be sworn in.
Right.
Founding member of you talked about the National Civil Rights Museum, helped redevelop the Orpheum along with your friend Pat Halloran, and talked about raising money and being involved with the Salvation Army. And there's so much more. You've won awards, being named Memphis Magazine as one of the Memphis 35. Which was people who've influenced Memphis over the last 35 years and critical to the growth and evolution of the city. Recognized by the United States Congress in 2008, the House Resolution 300 for your commitment to professional excellence, dedication, and improving Memphis. Just an amazing career. You've given so much of yourself to Memphis. I know you didn't do it alone. I know you said that you didn't do it alone, but you led the way, and especially for Beale Street back in the early 80s. Without that happening, there's no telling where the city would be right now, because there's a good chance without Beale Street redevelopment, there's no, Memphis Grizzlies here. So many things that would not have happened without Beale Street being redeveloped. What has this incredible ride been like for you the last 40 years?
Well, it's good and bad. I mean, with all the good comes bad, and initially, I think the greatest thing about Beale Street initially, when the city picked me to redevelop it, the first thing I did, and I mentioned this briefly last time, I said, I'm going to go in the Black community. And it wasn't, Harold Ford had just been elected to Congress then. And there weren't a lot of well-known African-American leaders in the community, except ministers of churches. But I went to everyone I knew and said, would you give me the name of someone I need to talk to and tell them what our vision is? And the first person I went to was Walter Bailey, who I think has been a great public service servant. I wish they would name the county office building after him, because he's they named the courthouse after his brother. But he gave me a list of people and said, nobody believes you're going to be able to do this, but keep in touch and help me, and I'll help you get this done. And he did. And but I think I told you within 2 weeks of it opening, people said that'll never happen. That'll never ever happen. And we're about ready to be interrupted by my wife. She's just got home, but it is. I was determined, and there was a group of people. I've said that last time: Lucia Gilliland, Lucy Shaw, different people who really believed in downtown Memphis. And I look at it is, and if you look at that 1972 story on Channel 3, that'll show you how bad it was. And so I'm glad I did it. Is it the most important thing in my life? No. My wife is, my kids are, my friends are, and that's it wasn't one person. I told you last time, it was Al James, it was Joe Sabatini, it was Paul Gurley. There were a lot of people that worked for me that helped make it happen, and it was the people who took a chance, the Johnny Robertsons, the Preston Lambs, that Silky Sullivan, all those people made a contribution. It was the Tommy Peters that said, look, I'm willing to invest money. And most people don't realize the state and the county and the local government only had $3 million in that project. There were 21 other $1 million we put into that project between ourselves and our restaurateurs. So this was not a subsidized project. This was a project that we developed on city-owned property. So, that's one reason I wrote the book, because there's a lot of misunderstanding and misconception. This was done by the will of a lot of people that said, "Hey, I believe in your dream, and I'm going to follow it." And it is the same thing I talked about Bill Morris. You have to be a salesman in the development business. You have to be able to take an idea and use that idea to convince other people to share that with you. And if you can't do that, you're not going to be very successful. In our development in Alabama, nobody believed we could ever get it done. No one even thought we could get started. And you have to have faith in doing that. My next goal is basically, we're going to do a project in downtown Memphis we're working on right now, near the Salvation Army headquarters on Jackson, the center there. And we hope to be successful, bidder, but we need to bring a grocery store down to downtown Memphis, and we need to create local commerce, and not to be afraid that people will be robbed or goods will be stolen. We need to create one that brings in the community, and that's my next big deal in Memphis, is to try, and hopefully we'll be successful in securing. It'll be a request for RFP, but that is kind of the loose end of St. Jude's on the corner of Parkway and Danny Thomas and Jackson. That neighborhood needs to be settled down, and they need to have a concrete plan, not just residential, but commercial, real commercial. And, they tried to do that in the Tillman, Binghamton area. It failed, not because the broker was great, but they didn't have the support and the internal support of the city and the major players in that area. I think in that area on Jackson, you can get the support of St. Jude's, you can get the support of the Salvation Army, you can get the support of the CETA, and I think you can make that work. And that needs to be done. That is a very important project, and I hope we're successful in getting it, because it needs to be a mixed-use development that brings in retail. When you analyze, there is no grocery store really in downtown. There really aren't certain businesses that you normally would have. And there aren't very many African-American owned businesses, which I think is essential if this city is going to move forward. And, it is, I pray that our city elects a good mayor, a mayor in the quality of Bill Morris, because we need right now to pull everybody up by the bootstraps and make it happen. It's not about individual success. It's about a community success. And that's why I'm interested in doing that project.
You said, quote, "My mother always fought for her sons. As a single mom, she made sure we worked hard. Even though she worked, she was there for us. She taught us never to quit no matter what. She also made us work hard to go to good colleges. My brother to Duke and myself to Vanderbilt. A strong mother shapes your life. I am so blessed to have had a strong mother," unquote. What do you remember most about your mom?
How tough she was. I mean, she was very tough. She, how'd you like to have no husband in the 1950s and 60s, and you live in a community where you don't really have any help. There's no one to take care of your kids. And she basically did everything for her children. And she was a saint of a woman. And, I can never repay all the things she did. She had a very terrible death. She died of cancer. And, but fortunately, she lived in a house I had built. And, but she, she just did things for other people. She used to do find stray animals. This is when people didn't do this, and she would bring them back to health, or birds that had fallen out of the nest and been injured, or cats. I mean, she had a whole menagerie of animals that she took care of. And she always, when she had no money, I'll never forget this, she had no money. She gave money to the Salvation Army and their kettle program. And she always figured it out. She's just an incredible, resilient person who died way too young and really never had a great life. Her life were her children. And she came from a big family. She came from 12 children, which was a lot in those days. And she just never really, her whole life was for her children, which is very rare today. I mean, and there are lots of single mothers raising children in the community, and I bless and hope that they will do it the way my mother did. She sacrificed everything for her children, but her goal was in life to give back. She wanted to make sure that every Sunday you went to church, that you understood school, that you dressed properly, even though we didn't have any money. You always dressed properly, and that you always contributed. And it's amazing. My brother's dead now. He died 2 years ago, but he was, went to Vietnam and could have gotten out of after one tour of duty, but he took a second tour of duty because he believed in the country. And I don't know how about the war, but he believed in helping his country, and he became a captain in the U.S. Army, and then went to work for the government after he was getting out of the service. Worked for the VA, helping improve VA hospitals all over the country, and money wasn't really what motivated him. It was service. And that's what I think our mother told us. It's service above self, as the Rotary Club says. And I think that's very important.
On senior night at Briarcrest back in September of 2020, your son Beau gave you and Valerie a football. It said on it, quote, "Thank you, Mom and Dad, for everything that you've done for me in my past 4 years of high school. Thank y'all for always being there for me. Love, Beau," unquote. That's awesome. Tell us, what do you believe that you and Valerie have passed on to your kids, to Beau and your older sons, Griffin and Fletcher the most?
Well, I think Beau is the toughest kid. I mean, not in a negative way, in a positive way. He's 5'9", he weighed 160 pounds. He was voted the most valuable player in his last football game against MUS. He got a college offer to play football in college. And most people would shy away from that. And he wanted to persevere. He now wants to be in life. He wants to be a writer, a songwriter. And so he goes to school in Nashville. He works at a songwriter restaurant at night. His whole life is devoted to that, and he is focused. And I think it's all about being focused. And his mother is very focused about doing things. And my other children are very focused. They don't get involved in frivolous things, and they have good lives. Their children are good. My oldest boy is I think one of the greatest fathers I can ever imagine. His children are his most important thing, and his wife is that way. And he's very dedicated to Christian Brothers when he went to high school, and he's very dedicated to his kids, making sure that they go to private schools that he thinks would help. And I think that's incredible. He sacrifices himself and his happiness for his children's happiness, and that's the way my mother was. To go to St. Mary's, which is a very expensive school, but I think the best school in Shelby County, is a great sacrifice to do that, to give up that, to give up something else is really remarkable. And she's brilliant. And my grandchild is very, very smart and works very hard and has the same qualities that he has as far as toughness. And anyway, I think that's what it's about. It's about your children are really the most important thing. And this is going to sound funny, Michael, but I really don't feel you're married till you have children, whether you adopt them, whether you have them. And that is really what, I think is very important in life, is to, have children that make a contribution, not only to you, but to them and to other people. And, I'm just very proud of my children. I can't tell you. They mean so much to me. But my wife is is a much tougher disciplinarian than I am. I'm on the soft end. She's like my mother was, but she sets the rules. She sets the rules on me, I assure you, and sets our boundaries. And her family is really interesting. Her father was a judge, he was a Democrat in East Tennessee, where usually Republicans are elected, but he was so respected. He was in the head of the criminal court in Blount County, and a man of unbelievable integrity, just incredible integrity. Raised four girls, and I remember when I married Valerie, because I'm a little bit older than she is. He said, I met him. I told him I wanted to meet him and tell him what I was going to do, or wanted to do, marry her. So he met me at the Cracker Barrel at the airport in the Tri-Cities. And he said, I just want to know two things. Do you have life insurance? and number one, that was number one thing. And do you love my daughter? And I said, well, I do have life insurance and I do love your daughter. And he said, well, that's all I need to know. And he said, I just want her to have somebody to take care of her, but she takes care of me more than I take care of her. So I'm lucky in that respect, and lucky in family. The other night before Christmas, we all met on Thursday night before Christmas, and our grandchildren and our children and their wives are all good people, and they do wonderful things in this community, and they do wonderful things at their school. And schools, my daughter-in-law is a marketing person at Christian Brothers High School, and she's very talented, Jamie. And so that's what it's about. It's really about family. And when you didn't have a father when you grow up, you don't really have a father. You have to kind of feel your way through what you want to really be and what you want to do. And so I was very blessed to have a lot of people in my life who were great mentors. And I said to my wife the other night, when I think about Mr. Crump, Charles Crump, in fact, I would never call him by his first name. Even, when I got in my 30s, I would never call him anything but Mr. Crump. John Maxwell, Bob Willis, all these people that my high school football coach, Bill Muncie, all these people had a great impact on my life and were very important. And my wife has had a great impact on my life. And it's hard to believe we've been married 25 years. It's hard to believe that. And I'm very fortunate. And I am very fortunate that in my spiritual life, I've had good people like Maxie Dunham and Brother Joel and the people at Christ Methodist have been very, very helpful. And so I think that's all important in your life too. And my wife said, "Do you sure you want to be buried at Vanderbilt?" I said, "Yeah, I do. I don't want to be buried. I just want my ashes spread near where Robert Penn Warren wrote All the King's Men." And because that had such an impact on my life, it's unbelievable. And I'm just blessed that I got an opportunity to go there.
Now, speaking of Valerie, you guys who just talked about, just celebrated your anniversary, I believe, on July 11th.
Yeah.
You said, quote, 24 years ago today in a little Methodist church in St. Helena, California, I married Valerie Calhoun. Great decision, unquote. She said this to me recently, quote, he told me in May when we were hanging out that we would be engaged by the end of the year. I scoffed at him because we were not even dating. We were engaged by the end of the year. The same persistence, et cetera, that helped him be a success and make Beale Street happen worked in his personal life too, unquote. And one more thing she said about you a few years ago, quote, he had help and others who believed in Beale Street, but it was my beast who made it happen, unquote. Tell us just a little bit, about the last, 24 plus years you guys have spent together, what it's been like.
Well, my wife is the greatest thing that's the greatest deal I've ever made. I'll say that.
Yeah.
She is a unbelievably hardworking, person. We were talking about the other day when Beau was a little boy, every day after getting up every morning at 3:00, going to work and coming home, she would take him to the zoo or to a park or spend 2 or 3 hours in some kind of program. And that's the kind of person he is. And then when I would get home, she'd always want to know what I was doing and what she could do to help and so forth and so on. She's a special woman who comes from a special family, and she has a very special mother who, and it just, in life, and I had been married before, but in life, you find people that are really you were supposed to be with. And I think God was trying to give me someone in my life who would complement whatever I did as far as my talents and so forth. And she's that person. And I don't know what my life would have been without her.
Wonderful. My last question for you, John, is what are the most important lessons you've learned in life?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think you learn lessons every day as you go along. I think, when you quit in life you just can't quit. And I look back at my life and think of the times that I, got discouraged and I always felt that if I could stay focused, and being focused is important, then I could accomplish, what I set out to be. There's no time limit in anything in life. And while people may put time limits on you, you shouldn't have to put time limits on yourself. When Beale Street, I didn't say it was going to be developed in 3 years or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. It was going to be developed when it got right. Same thing in Alabama. I never said it'd be done in a year or 2 years or 5 years. It may be not done. I may be dead when it gets final. The last person moves in, the last house is built. So it's keeping a perspective of, not everything goes your way, but you keep focused on making it happen. And I think I've been very good about being focused. I don't lose my attention span very often. Now, the reason she calls me Beast is, I do unbelievable things that, a lot of people wouldn't do. Here I am with a heart condition out ringing a bell and for the Salvation Army because I believe it. And I think that is what sums up of what I think is important in life. It is not, as Avram Fogelman said, it is not to confuse effort with results. And effort isn't just in business. Effort is in life. And you don't quit, if things get tough. You can be discouraged. You can feel bad. You can have a horrible day. But you shouldn't quit. You should try to complete what you set out to do. And that's really my philosophy.
Memphis has been so very lucky that you decided not to go into law for your career. When you made that decision, obviously there's no way you would have known at that time all the big things that would happen, in Memphis for you. But I'm pretty sure that you've always had the confidence that you were going to be successful, as your mom put it, quote, no matter what. I had really such a great time talking to you over the last couple of podcasts. I really appreciate you coming on. And
I want to thank you. You've now your trainer is my trainer.
Yes, and he told me that. Yeah,
LT, and that doesn't stand for Lawrence Taylor. I promise you.
Right.
We have a lot of connections, and I appreciate your life and what you've accomplished and what you continue. And I hope this becomes an incredible program and you become the next major podcaster in the world.
I appreciate that so much. I appreciate you once again, your time. Thank you so much, John.
Hey, have a great day.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.